right, here we go. Hi, I'm Kristy Knichel, co-host of the LLC podcast. It's an honor to introduce listeners to inspiring people who are making a real difference in logistics and supply chain. With the LLC podcast, you'll hear inspirational stories, both personal and professional challenges our guests have overcome, how their backgrounds help to shape who they are today, and how they empower others, give back to their communities, and often the world. So today, I'm very excited because I have a very special guest host, Coffey, Knichel Logistics' very own LTL manager, and she's also my youngest sister. So I'm excited to do this podcast with her and our special guest today to talk about LTL. So today, I am thrilled to introduce Garrett, a remarkable individual who holds multiple prestigious positions in the transportation and logistics industry. Currently serving as the Senior Vice President of LTL Division at FreightPlus, Kristys is also the founder and chief creative of Understand LTL, as well as an advisor of Claim Unity. Kristys has an impressive professional background, which began with his remarkable 8-year tenure at Old Dominion, where he excelled as a skilled CDL driver, pricing inspector, and analyst. His expertise then led him to become an esteemed advisor of transportation and logistics at BetaBox for approximately 1 year. Following this, Kristys served as the VP of LTL services at Syncrogistics for 2 years before embarking on a successful journey at Reconex. Starting as a director of LTL pricing and carrier relations at Reconex, Kristys quickly climbed the ranks to become the VP of pricing and carrier relations and eventually assumed the role of chief strategy officer. His dedication and expertise were evident during his 4-year tenure at Reconex, where he made significant contributions to the company's success. So thank you for being here, Kristys. And as you call yourself LTL User X, thinking about the world through the eyes of LTL. So how are you doing?
You brought up some things I didn't remember. That was a heck of a background.
It is. Isn't it nice to hear?
Yeah, great to be here. The one point I'd contest, I don't know how skilled of a CDL driver I was. If you take, actually on day one, I almost set a trailer on fire.
That's pretty impressive.
But if you take that out, then I guess my average after that was okay. But
well, good to know.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of your extensive background within logistics and probably mainly or a good bit of LTL, and now as a senior VP at FreightPlus and founder of Understand LTL, can you share with everyone a little bit more about where you grew up, your education, and how did you get into this LTL supply chain craziness?
Yeah, I will. And first of all, I like kind of the feel and theme of this, podcast and discussion where it's not just the hard technical supply chain facts. It's, some personal and soft stuff as well. So that's great because it's all part of the story, right?
It is. It kind of lets you know like who, people know who you really are. So right. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So I guess I probably have a pretty untraditional path to the US LTL market, having grown up in Western Canada and didn't have a single family member, or I think I had one friend's dad who was in trucking, but other than that, had no background, no, connection at all to the industry. And so, long story short, I ended up moving to Columbus, Ohio by way of Eastern Africa, where I met my wife, who grew up in Columbus. And we met over there in 2004, and then just very randomly. And then I moved down to Ohio. She was going to Ohio State at the time and kind of started our life there and got married in our early 20s. So I was kind of looking at the Ohio State route as well as far as school. I started with like a local college there, Columbus State Community College. Who oddly enough, I just met somebody recently who also went to that same community college during those same years. So kind of a small world moment, but started there just with kind of a, general business target. And I was the person that had so many interests. I've always been like a generalist and been pretty good at a bunch of things. There was never a clear path. Like I was never just a math genius or English or writing genius. I just was okay at a bunch of stuff. And so, that coupled with my broad interests from traveling in different cultures to, the economy and business and just such a broad thing. I played sports growing up. I was a bookworm. I, played a little music here and there, a couple different instruments. So it really got hard to narrow things down. And I was just flip-flopping, from major, college major, decisions like every other week, it felt like. So I basically was just, grinding away at that at the school, and kind of like building our family at the same time. I eventually switched over to a virtual, like, remote program through Northern Arizona University. And this was a decade or more back. So, it was kind of before that really took off and was kind of an available path, at almost every school. But meanwhile, I'd started working for Old Dominion Freight Lines in Columbus, Ohio, in their Columbus terminal in dock operations, and kind of doing that in parallel with my schooling. And at some point I was like, okay, if I boil down all the things that I like about the world, my interests, they all kind of like arrive back at the same place, which is somehow quantifying and accounting for real world, activities in, like, I love numbers, I love math, but only if it was connected to something that I could see or experience. I didn't like all the, theoretical aspects. So
None
that
of us did, Curtis. None of us did.
right. Oh, that's good to know. So, obviously LTL pricing and costing and yield, and it's all about, extrapolating these numbers on a spreadsheet or in software to very physical things, moving in and out of trailers, and then those physical things, those trucks and trailers moving around the country. And I just absolutely fell in love with all the variables and dynamics that went into LTL. And it was, to me, like, I felt lucky I stumbled into it, because it is very quantitative. It is very complex. It never gets boring. And so I kind of saw it as like, man, this is a secret, really high load mentally or cognitively type industry and field to be in. And there's not a ton of people, like, going through college and saying, I want to go into LTL freight. It's more the banking and consulting and all that. So really just fell in backwards to the industry, stuck with it long enough and tried enough things that, it got its hooks in me. And then at some point, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that maybe I could change some things. Maybe I could make it better. It wasn't just like, learning the ins and outs of everything and then I'd made it. It was more, hey, this doesn't have to be like this, or just pushing against things that were the way they were. And typically, if the answer was just that, it is, it's always been this way, then that's a good red flag or a good signal, that's maybe something that could be innovated against. So yeah, I'm now year 16, I guess, into LTL. I've spent my whole professional career in the industry, and just having a blast and really happy with, how things have gone. And it's cool to meet and talk with so many different people across the industry. It's been interesting to leverage, social media and writing and LinkedIn, and then getting some opportunities to speak here and there out in the industry. It just makes it that much better. So having a blast.
That's awesome. And what I love about it is that, I think the industry in general, even though my background's not LTL, it's always changing, like you said. And even the comment you said about that's the way we always did it. I think now it's always like, how can we make it better? How can we change that for the future? And I think that that's always going to be something that we're looking at within this industry, in every aspect. So yeah, definitely interesting career though that you have had. And because I'm in my 25th year, and Casey, we'll let you speak next. And I know you have some questions for Curtis, and I'll let you take it off.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for that information, Curtis. And we're so excited to have you on this podcast today. In LTL, as you know, and probably everyone knows, the hot topic is YRC and their bankruptcy. So there's a lot of disruption going on in the LTL market right now. And how do you think that this is going to or what are the biggest impacts, I should say, of this bankruptcy on our market, and when will it normalize?
Good question. I've heard different, terms being thrown around to describe this event. Obviously, it's what I would call like a black swan type event, in that it's not, it's not part of your typical market cycle. Every 2 to 3 years, a large top 5 carrier doesn't go out of business. So it's definitely hard to plan for, but I would push back on, some folks have said it's like a reset or the great reset to the LTL industry. I don't think it's quite that impactful. It's definitely a large realignment. But I think in the long run, we will all be better for it as an industry, as a market. If you have more shippers and customers out there now dealing with and sending their freight through the networks of carriers that just operate better, are more financially healthy, have probably newer equipment and more technology involved, for the most part, it's just it's gonna kind of raise everybody's level in the industry. So obviously a very controversial past with just so many acquisitions that Yellow had made, including, I was just reading about this the other day, like not many people talk about, but they bought a trucking company in China like a decade or so ago, and kind of, it seemed we're on like a world domination type pathway, and then sold that years later. And obviously the Yellow Roadway merger, bundling up all the USF carriers, Holland Redaway. So yeah, it was interesting timeline. It'd be neat to see that, say the last 30 years of Yellow's history kind of like plotted out and quantified in a timeline, and just all the different acquisitions and mergers and, levels of profitability, debt taken on. Ultimately, I think the way this worked out is there ended up being too many constraints, of course, with the union labor situation. I believe that LTL carriers in 2023 and beyond just have to be so flexible and dynamic, and turn on a dime, and just, be customer centric and do what's best for their customers, while also being very protective of their yield. I mean, it is not cheap owning that much equipment, buying and building new terminals, having, labor be such a high percentage of your overall costs, with folks that are needed to, fill all the seats in the trucks and the forklifts and staff those terminals. So they're not, they're very, very, asset intensive and capital intensive, obviously. And so they need to be very smart and strategic, and expand kind of consistently and slow and steady. And just Yellow being, that close to the brink of closure, and just losing that much money in so many years, just, it wasn't sustainable. So
I have a question for you. Like, have you heard from other carriers that you've talked to out there now that this has happened? Like, how has this impacted them? Like, are they excited? Are they picking up more business because of it? Is it more challenging? Like, what are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it depends who you talk to at those carriers. Maybe the sales reps on the ground are pretty excited. And I think overall, like, the average mood of the other carriers would be like cautiously optimistic about it. I mean, of course, if they can pick up, new business and get some growth where it does make sense for them, both a geographical and like a freight profile perspective, then yeah, they'll take it. I think timing was definitely, positive in the fact that most of the larger carriers that I had been talking with probably had 5 to 15% available capacity. So if you look at, in Yellow's last few months, where I would say from probably May till end of June, there was already business peeling away slower. And then pretty much July, that the signs were all there, and folks had enough warning to kind of start the search for other providers at that point. So Yellow probably had, 7 to 8% maybe of the LTL market. And so I believe, it's hard to know in LTL with no centralized data, but it does seem like there was enough available capacity to absorb that freight. What I've been saying though, on like as another layer, is it's not just an equation of, okay, this much freight, do we have this much capacity by way of equipment and drivers and dock doors? It's not just a black and white carryover. It's all the other things that we're kind of behind on in LTL and that are antiquated, and setting up new pricing and the admin side and account setup, and just all the other things that are adjacent to actually moving and hauling the freight. I think that's where we're seeing more chaos, and just pricing departments at carriers are getting behind again, just because there's all this new business to now look at and quantify. So that to me, again, that's just an opportunity of where we need to get better. LTL carriers themselves are very very good and very effective at picking up, moving, and hauling freight. And I think the rest of us can kind of pitch in, and with the digital connectivity and just the friction involved with doing business in general, that's where we can see a lot of gains by improving.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think, I just want to make a statement before Casey has her next question, but I think it's sad that this happened, obviously, to a large carrier like that in our industry. Obviously, it creates opportunity for a lot of people, but then you also have a lot of people that are out of jobs, and hopefully a lot of those people are finding jobs. I know some of those people are, but maybe not everybody will. So I just wanted to put that out there, to everyone, and that we all appreciate everything that Yellow has done while they have been here, and all the people. And obviously, if anyone does need help reaching out to your network, and any of us, I'm sure, would help try to connect people to try to find jobs. So go ahead,
Absolutely.
Casey.
Yeah.
And so I fell into the trap of the Economist, feedback on things, and I've poked fun at Jason Miller for this in the past. What about the people? It's not all just numbers on a chart. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's never a good thing when that many people lose work, at one point in time. So it's been encouraging. I've seen a lot of people that I know they're already find employment and even get, better promotions and better jobs as a result of this. So that's good to see. But yeah, it's pretty tough from, the rehoming of all those people.
Yeah, no, I think, you brought up a great point too. Just the people in general. There's always a person behind all of the stuff that happens. So, but yeah, hopefully, the people do move forward, hopefully in a better way, and with some of the promotions or whatnot. So,
right.
Sure.
All right.
So you touched a little bit on all of YRC's assets, and we've seen in the news a little bit of a bidding war of Estes and then Old Dominion on the YRC terminals. If a carrier were to purchase the terminals, how do you think that would affect the LTL market and that carrier's market share?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to stay on top of and kind of watch play out. I think, what we're seeing is with OD and Estes both putting in these stalking horse bids, as they're called. It's not necessarily an open auction yet. It's more they're kind of positioning for when, as the bankruptcy progresses and they do start liquidating assets, they're, front of the line to have a shot at those. So both of those carriers are obviously very, very large, being Estes is the top or the largest private trucking company in North America. But both, pretty profitable too. OD, we all know their operating ratio and yield, industry leading. Estes, we don't know, it's a private company, but the signs say that they're operating pretty well too. So they're both in the position to make this kind of investment. I don't think there's going to be any or much immediate change from this. This is more of playing the long game. This is going to position them, because at the end of the day, trucks and trailers, in a supply chain crunch or in certain markets, they're harder to get a hold of quickly. But it's that real estate and those terminals that are truly the finite, part of this equation. So if you even look at now, like I was thinking earlier today, it'd be an interesting visual to plot out all the current LTL carriers and then plot out who owns them versus who's actually using them, because that would tell a pretty interesting story. Yellow only owned just under half of the terminals that they were using. If you look at some of their public SEC reporting, I looked at something from December 2022 that said, I think it was 308 terminals and they owned 142 of them, and they leased like 160 something. So that's already cut in half as far as what's actually up for sale. But yeah, it's just having that trump card from, offering short-term or even long-term leases on certain properties, but knowing that as you strategically expand and grow in different regions, you ultimately have that, that fail-safe of having the dock doors and the availability. And I think dock doors we like to talk about drivers and equipment on the road, but I think dock doors and terminals are the ultimate metric of, LTL carrier productivity and just capacity and future growth.
I would have to agree with that one. So let's move away from yellow talk and focus on LTL technology, which seems to be something that you're really rallying behind and getting behind different new companies within the LTL world. So when it comes to this technology, what do you think is the future of LTL technology, and how are we going to get there?
This subject's exciting to me because I think it's bigger than just what's happening with LTL technology. It's as technology in general, and the way that the internet and just the democratizing of business through digital connections and API connections back and forth between products and companies, like it's just flattening and opening all this opportunity. Like 10-ish years ago, you had to go with one of the big TMS providers or a big third party, or really it was just the bigger carriers that had any semblance of technology. And they could, typically they'd go for a broad over a narrow strategy. So they'd be like, yeah, we can do it all, but do they do any single thing really well? I don't know. That's up for debate. But now you're seeing, because there's way less friction in terms of both cost as well as, just the connectivity and the seamlessness of information going back and forth, you can now have companies that go very, very deep on very narrow specific categories, become the best in that single category and be the standard ultimately. And then, almost everybody should end up using them. So it's what I've heard referred to as like an unbundling of technology, where typically it was all held, by a few key players. Now it's getting unbundled and opened up, and it's really exciting to me. I mean, Shiplify I've talked about for a year or two. They're going deep and narrow on locations and defining them in terms of LTL. Navix now is doing the same thing with the audit and pay, portion of LTL, which it's been a huge issue for years, and there's so much friction there. Companies, just even in between those two, obviously Shiplify is more on the front end defining locations. Navix is kind of the, batting cleanup with sorting through all the issues and discrepancies, but just visibility, rating. We've kind of painted with a lot of really broad brushstrokes, I think, in LTL, and just kind of put up with, with the errors and the gaps. And, things like you go to a TMS, run a rate, or even a carrier's own website, and you're pretty much just going to get a rate spit out based on the zips, the weight, and the class. But if that shipment, were to qualify for something in the rules tariff or some other pricing mechanism, in most cases, you're not even going to see that. So we're still giving shippers inaccurate quotes in a lot of cases. And obviously some of that is driven by, lack of information if they don't offer dimensions or something, but still we got a long way to go there. So I would just say overall, like high level, what's exciting is there's definitely a push right now for just digital connectivity from end to end from EBOLs all the way down to invoices. And we're slowly seeing things that used to be handled manually and through emails back and forth, get on the roadmap to have APIs and more automated process built around them. And eventually that's going to be with claims, with invoice discrepancies. So yeah, it's going to make us all better and free us up, for more important things like conversations like this.
Yeah, I would agree. In LTL, my biggest complaint is that there's so many what ifs, and trying to teach that to a new employee is a struggle sometimes, because it could be something that happens once every 3 months, or it could be a limited access fee that a lot of customers, they don't know that this would be limited access. And sometimes I don't know it's limited access. So
yeah,
having that automation, can help so many different accessorials and the surprise charges at the end of the day that everyone gets a little bit upset for, but sometimes we just don't know.
Well, and I was going to say, that's a good point, Casey. Another thing I was thinking about, it'd be great if they make some kind of where you can take a picture of your freight, right? And it just automatically gives you the dimensions and the weight, or some type of technology that does that to at least make that part of it maybe easier. I don't know. Maybe something exists or someone's working on it, but.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the works. I think the biggest bottleneck for dimensioning technology is it's got to be, certified and standardized, and everybody has to be up to the same standards. So, but I think you can get, almost all the way there and still get beneficial information by, like a smartphone app, that has AR, augmented reality, dimensioning capabilities. Those already exist. And maybe it's not something you wouldn't go to, it's not something you'd go to court and fight a charge over, but it would, on the front end, it would lead you in the right direction.
Right.
But yeah, things like that. I mean, there's only one, in an entire LTL carriers network, there's only one place that all freight travels through, and that's through the door, the back, the semi-trailer door of whatever truck is picking it up. But once it's picked up, it doesn't always get unloaded until delivery. Sometimes loads are left on or they're head loaded, and not everything is cross-docked. So that's really the best opportunity to catch the, cast the widest net and catch every dimension. But again, it's just logistically speaking, on the ground, having something handheld for a driver or mounted on a truck, it gets we're not there yet. I don't think.
It doesn't sound so simple, I guess, but I just know I've had to work with Casey quite a bit the last several months on some of the LTL stuff in regards to some of reclassing or all that, but some of the customers just saying well, I don't have a measuring tape or this, and I don't know what the dimensions are, and then that just causes more problems. So it's can we fix this problem somehow?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's an industry of exceptions. It's to what you were saying, Casey, with the what ifs. You can state a true fact, but then you can have all these 10 other bullet points of, well, unless that, it all changes. So
yeah, we've been dealing with cubic capacity recently a lot, and that trying to figure that out. It's the LTL carriers, I swear, they're we don't want you to know how to calculate this. We're just going to end up charging you twice as much as we quoted you. So
wow.
Yeah, that's a different one. So there's all these rules. So I'm reading through rules tariffs for each carrier and trying to figure it out and see if it needs it for this one, but not that one. So it's a very, very wonderful.
Speaking of that, Casey, and I don't know if you know or you do, Kristys, but is there any technology out there, or people thinking about I don't know, you putting that in the system and it just populating the rules and stuff? So is this stuff you have to remember?
I mean, for the most part, it's one of those things where it's kind of head knowledge of, hey, I think this may be this situation, so let me just double confirm. I'm not aware of any technology, but Kristys might know.
No, not that exists today. I mean, it's honestly a little pet project of mine. I've got that LTLtariffs.com website where I just basically link to all the current tariffs, but I did experiment with one carrier so far. I basically ran their tariff, the whole PDF document, 100 or 200 pages, through like the same kind of AI engine that, powers Chat GPT. So you can interact with it and ask it, what does the capacity load charge mean, or where's the overlength fee found? And so it'll read the document, find and explain certain things to you. So from there, I think it's only a step or two further to connect it to like a TMS or some sort of rate quoting tool where it's sending, it's hitting with certain messages based on the profile of the shipment. And that'd be great to have, dynamic information popping in to the interface to help guide the quoter or the user of the product. So honestly, with like this conversational AI and how it's really come mainstream and come out in the last, year or less, I think we're a lot closer to that because you can kind of just build a layer on top of what's already out there.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, we all know LTL is very complicated, and we have many different accessorials and how our freight impacts our class, cost, and different locations can cause increases. There's always something to learn, and I always tell this to my new employees that still, I'm 15 years in here, I learn something new every single day. But we all need to learn. So you've created Understand LTL, and this is to help people understand LTL. How do you think this has impacted your current clients, and how can it impact future clients?
Yeah, I think it's early, in the life of Understand LTL as a company and what it can do for the industry. It's been launched for less than a year at this point. I'm working on course number 2, which is more of a deep dive on pricing and costing, and we'll be more specific to people that are dealing with LTL pricing and negotiating rates and that sort of thing. But right now there's kind of I hate to call it LTL 101 because like most of those types of courses that I've seen all look the same, and they have a bunch of history thrown in that somebody trying to learn just how to quote and ship properly might not necessarily care about. What I did was aim to teach the first principles of how everything works. So you won't find, specific carrier names or certain things in the material that are subject to change and have to be continually updated as, companies go out of business or rebrand or whatever. So the whole point is like, just boil all these concepts down to give people the mental models to be able to look at an LTL situation and have, the ingredients to make something and figure it out. So it's going well so far. I've had about 50 people go through it. I've had everybody from carriers, 3PLs, some shippers, some TMS and technology companies. Like it's really kind of touched almost every part of the industry as far as who's interacted with it and gone through it. Gotten a lot of good feedback. I think I need to add some video. It's a lot of reading and visuals. Like I did try to go heavy on the visuals just because you don't see a lot of that in our industry. It's all about shapes fitting in and out of other shapes, but you look in a rules tariff and there's really no pictures or diagrams or anything. So
I wish there were, though.
Yeah,
I definitely draw my own diagrams to help myself and my team. So
yeah, so it's going well. Just trying to grow that it's kind of a part-time endeavor right now, but just with everything I can. And then I'm actually assembling kind of a live in-person mastermind event that's also being powered by the Understand LTL brand. So that's going to be in November, and there's information on the website, the Understand LTL website for that. But just I want it to be more than an education brand. I want it to be really driving community in the industry and, get a bunch of people around the same table that see different sides of the industry, have different experiences, just learn from each other, get to know each other. And, at the end of the day, we all have the blocking and tackling and kind of the monotonous work we need to do. But I think it's so valuable to, get in front of other people in the industry face to face and learn from some of the leaders, So looking forward to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. And I give big kudos to you for stepping out and doing that. Like you said, it's like a side project right now. And if you're listening, everybody, check out understandltl.com. Is that correct for the website?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I know we're coming towards the end of the show, but I have one last question for you. So I think I'm going to ask, well, how about I ask a question and I'll have Casey ask a question. My question would be, what is one piece of advice that you would give any young individual coming into this industry?
I mean, you have the age-old advice of just put your head down, learn, spend the first decade even just knocking it out of the park, learning more, growing your capacity for the industry, for knowledge and experience. I think that's never going to be outdated, as the internet progresses and we get more and more technology and automation. It's still not going to be completely programmed and robotic. So you can, good example, you can tell the difference between an experienced like LTL carrier customer service rep or somebody that's just like maybe outsourced labor or new, like the level and the depth of responses you get back to help solve your problem are night and day. So definitely, dig in and learn as much as you can, find the right people to learn from, get mentors. But then also, don't delay on thinking that you can also make a difference and start looking at, what can be changed, what can be improved, be skeptical, ask questions. And we're only where we are now because people have done that in the past. So everybody, that interacts with the industry or is in the industry day to day has a right, in my opinion, to put their hand up and try to make something better. So yeah, don't be afraid to do that, but definitely couple it with like building that really good, solid foundation.
Love that. Casey, what about you? What's your question?
I want to know who inspires you on a daily basis.
In general?
Yeah, just in general.
Man, I would say at this point, because life has gotten busy and there's so many things going on work-wise, personal, I honestly just get inspiration by looking at like my 3 and 7-year-olds that just have fun, like just live to, a moment at a time. They don't need advice like breathe, slow down, one thing at a time, because it's not even applicable yet. That's their natural, outlook on life. And that's a good reminder. And it kind of like pulls me back, into why I'm doing a lot of this stuff. Not to get too cheesy, but yeah, it's so easy. I get too caught up in the big picture sometimes and how all these different things are connected to others. And it's nice just to like get that weight off your shoulders and throw a ball or, like catch a worm or something like that.
Yeah. No, I think Casey and I both can side with you there. Obviously having little ones, Casey has a little one herself. Mine's going to be 13 soon, but now, I mean, I think that's a great thing to keep you going, and why you're doing what you're doing, right? Building for your family.
Right. Yeah.
Which is awesome.
And otherwise, as far as mentors, there's been so many, I mean, both in the industry and out, that have inspired me or I've taken bits and pieces from. So for that side of it, it's really hard to narrow it down.
Gotcha. Well, I feel like this time flew by today. So, as we're coming to the end of the show here, Kristys, thanks so much for sharing your personal and professional journey with us and our listeners. And Casey, thank you for being a great co-host with me today. So for more information about Kristys, please visit him on LinkedIn at Kristys Garrett. He also has a website for understandltl.com. And stay tuned for the inspiring story